Why do super empaths attract avoidants? This question is one of the most fascinating and complex mysteries in the psychology of human relationships. The attraction between super empaths and avoidants always feels like a mysterious and magnetic force. At first glance, this relationship seems like one that completes each other's missing parts, like two puzzle pieces that are incomplete on their own, but create a whole picture when joined together. It is often said that opposites always attract, and this principle appears here with full intensity. Empaths, because of their sensitivity, deep intuition and selfless love, are drawn to those who are secretly hungry for closeness yet afraid of it at the same time. According to attachment theory, humans generally form relationships in three styles: secure, anxious, and avoidant. Empaths are often anxious or deep-feeling individuals, while avoidants are those who simultaneously long for intimacy and run away from it. This contradiction pulls both toward each other with unusual intensity. As Kierkegaard once said, "Anxiety is the dizziness of freedom." This perfectly describes the state of the avoidant. When an empath offers them unconditional acceptance, they feel peace for a moment, but in the next moment that same freedom turns into fear and panic. The presence of the empath brings them closer to their most hidden emotions, and that closeness becomes both a blessing and a threat. Psychologists have long emphasized that such relationships are actually a continuation of childhood wounds, where the promise of healing is hidden along with echoes of old pains. That is why this bond is not mere coincidence, but an unconscious repetition. So let us now look ahead at the reasons that help us understand why empaths feel such a strong pull toward avoidance. For more such insightful thoughts, stay with us and don't forget to subscribe. Reason number 1: opposite attachment needs. Empaths are always in search of closeness and emotional depth. Their nature is shaped in such a way that they don't see love as just a feeling, but as a source of survival and peace. They long for relationships where emotions can be openly shared and their love can be fully embraced. Avoidants, on the other hand, walk a very different path. Deep inside, they too desire closeness, but the moment intimacy approaches, an unexplainable fear pushes them back. This very contradiction, one moving forward and the other stepping back, creates a magnetic pull between them. These opposite attachment needs are in fact the core reason why super empaths are always drawn toward avoidance. A thinker once said that man often fears the truth he most desires. This reflects the state of the avoidant. When the empath comes closer with unconditional acceptance, the avoidant feels calm for a moment, but soon after, anxiety surrounds them. Vulnerability makes them feel powerless, and they immediately retreat. Here the empath makes the mistake of believing that with just a little more love, a little more patience, the avoidant will finally change. But the reality is, the more the empath moves forward, the more the avoidant steps back. This push and pull dynamic creates a cycle that traps both in confusion, exhaustion, and pain. Yet, there is a solution. The empath must understand that healing can never be forced on someone else. Love does not mean endlessly sacrificing one's energy, it must also include boundaries. When the empath protects their own light while offering love, the dynamics shift. For the avoidant, this becomes a new experience. They see that the other person is not just a healer but also someone who knows their own self-worth. This moment presents the avoidant with a new choice: to break down their walls and move the relationship forward, or to step away. At this point, the attraction itself changes shape. The same opposite attachment needs that once caused pain and struggle now become an opportunity for growth and healing. The empath's longing for closeness and the avoidant's fear of it no longer repel each other, but instead create a powerful pull. The empath believes they can break through the avoidant's walls, and the avoidant finds someone willing to stay despite their fear. This contradiction creates a recurring attraction between them, like two opposing forces drawn together into the same center. Reason number 2. Familiarity of childhood wounds. The relationship between an empath and an avoidant is not built merely on present attraction, its roots are buried deep in childhood. Empaths often grow up in households where the emotional climate is uncertain. Sometimes love is given, and sometimes it is suddenly taken away. Through this instability, they learn that sensing the emotions of others and responding to them is essential for survival. This ability later becomes their defining trait. The avoidance journey is the opposite. Their caregivers treated vulnerability as weakness, and expressions of emotion were met with criticism or even punishment. As a result, they built walls around their hearts. As the saying goes, a person carries the same walls they built in childhood for protection, even if in adulthood those walls become a prison. This is why, as adults, avoidants long for closeness yet still retreat from it. Here a famous philosophical idea comes to mind: what is familiar is not always safe, but the mind confuses the two. This perfectly captures the dynamic. For the empath, being with the avoidant brings a strange sense of familiarity, as though they have seen this scene before. The avoidant, too, recognizes in the empath's deep sensitivity an old reflection, the same experience they tried to escape in childhood. The mistake arises here. The empath takes this familiarity as destiny and throws themselves into it. They believe their purpose is to heal the avoidant, yet psychological patterns reveal that the more the empath pushes toward healing, the more the avoidant feels pressured and pulls away. These are the same childhood survival patterns resurfacing in adulthood, but familiarity should not always be mistaken for truth. As it is said, the wound is the place where the light enters you. For the empath, the real path is to realize that what feels like home is not always love, it may also be the echo of old wounds. For the avoidant, the lesson is that the walls which once provided protection have now become the source of loneliness. When both begin to acknowledge these childhood imprints, the picture starts to change. The empath transforms their compassion from blind sacrifice into wisdom, and the avoidant begins to take small but meaningful steps toward accepting closeness. In that moment, childhood wounds no longer remain just pain, they become the doorway to healing and growth. This is why the familiarity of childhood wounds pulls empaths and avoidants toward each other. The empath recognizes a role they have always played, and the avoidant sees a pattern already etched within their heart. This shared familiarity creates a powerful yet complex attraction between them. Reason number 3, empath's healing instinct. The most defining trait of the empath is their healing instinct. They subconsciously see themselves in the role of a healer, as if their very presence is enough to mend the wounds of others. This tendency takes root early in childhood, when an empath learns that fixing those around them is the only way to feel safe. As they grow, they are drawn toward relationships where the other person is closed off, wounded, or guarded. The avoidance nature becomes precisely that kind of challenge, a locked door the empath feels it is their responsibility to open. The philosophical truth here is that a person often sets out to heal the very wound they once carried within themselves. When the empath looks at the avoidant, they see not only a partner but also a puzzle that must be solved. The avoidant's silence and distance pull the empath in even more because to them it is an opportunity to prove their healing power. Psychological theories suggest that empaths often carry what is called a fixer complex. They believe that with enough patience and love the other person will eventually change. This belief draws them even closer to the avoidant, because the avoidant's guarded nature becomes a wall they feel compelled to break through. Yet, hidden within this is a deep paradox. The harder the empath tries to heal, the more pressure the avoidant feels, and the further they withdraw. This very dynamic gives rise to a trauma bond. On one side, the empath keeps giving, healing and longing for closeness. On the other, the avoidant comes a little closer, only to quickly pull away again. This push and pull creates a cycle, where even a small moment of closeness feels monumental, binding the empath even tighter. Psychological insights emphasize that intermittent reinforcement is the strongest form of emotional bonding, and that is exactly what happens here. But there is also a solution to this dynamic. The empath must understand that healing is only possible when the other person is ready to open their doors. As the saying goes, no wound can be healed from the outside. Light cannot enter without the readiness that comes from within. This is why the empath must not waste their healing instinct on blind sacrifice. The true wisdom lies in protecting their light and offering it only where it is valued. For the avoidant, the lesson is also clear. Walls do not always provide safety. Sometimes they only deepen loneliness. When the avoidant begins to take small steps toward allowing vulnerability, true healing begins. At that point, The relationship stops being just a trauma bond and can transform into a conscious connection. This is why the empath's healing instinct, combined with the avoidant's guarded nature, creates such a magnetic pull. To the empath, it feels like unlocking a hidden lock, and for the avoidant, the intensity of this experience becomes unforgettable. This attraction pulls them back to each other again and again, no matter how difficult the path may be. Reason number 4. Emotional regulation and power dynamics. The moment the avoidant's mood or energy shifts, the empath instantly senses it and brings balance through gentleness, calmness, or simply their presence. This is why the avoidant feels a unique sense of safety with the empath. They know there is someone who can sense the storm within them and hold it. Yet this very closeness becomes a paradox. The intimacy that brings the avoidant comfort simultaneously turns into a threat within them. This is where the game of push and pull begins. Whenever the empath comes closer, the avoidant feels as though their freedom is under threat. The result is that they immediately create distance, but as soon as the distance grows, deep down the avoidant begins to crave once again the very safety that the empath's presence provides. This cycle never ends. The empath moves forward, the avoidant steps back, and then both are pulled toward each other again. A thinker once said, "Power is not always in control. Sometimes it hides in the ability to soothe." This quote perfectly captures the dynamic. The empath maintains emotional balance in the relationship through their soothing power. To the avoidant, this ability feels like a blessing, but at the same time they also sense they are becoming too dependent on it. That very dependency frightens them, because the entire foundation of the avoidant's personality rests on self-reliance. Psychological theories suggest that co-regulation of the nervous system is a fundamental element in relationships. Since the empath can instantly absorb and calm the emotions of others, this becomes a rare experience for the avoidant. But when this regulation repeatedly comes from only one side, a power imbalance is created. The empath overgives, pouring out their energy to soothe the other's heart, yet in return, the very intimacy slips out of their hands. The avoidant withdraws, and the empath tries even harder. This imbalance keeps the cycle repeating. Yet this dynamic can be reshaped into something healthier. For the empath, it is essential to realize that emotional regulation is not solely their responsibility. Without boundaries, this gift turns into sacrifice. As the saying goes, he who heals must also guard his own flame. This means the empath must protect their own light while offering healing. For the avoidant, it is equally important to accept that vulnerability is not a threat but a human necessity. When they begin to take small steps toward openness, the cycle can transform into a new balance. These very power dynamics and emotional regulation form the root of the attraction. The avoidant receives a safety they have never experienced, while the empath finds a purpose they subconsciously long for. But when boundaries and self-awareness are added, this attraction can shift from being a destructive cycle into becoming a source of healing and growth. When we step back and look at the relationship between an empath and an avoidant, a repeating pattern becomes clear. What begins with deep love and sincerity eventually reaches a stage where the empath gives too much and the avoidant pulls away too far. The result is always the same, a cycle of closeness and distance that leaves both feeling incomplete and unsatisfied. The core truth is that space is as valuable to avoidants as connection is to empaths. The moment that space is broken, the avoidant feels cornered, and what could have blossomed into trust quickly turns into resistance. Out of love, the empath tries harder, but that very effort unconsciously pushes the avoidant even further away. Breaking this cycle is not about pulling others closer, but about recognizing and strengthening one's own inner power. The lesson is that true attraction is born when a person focuses on their own growth, self-worth, and healing. When the empath protects their light, sets boundaries, and learns to love without losing themselves, the dynamic naturally begins to change. Sometimes the avoidant responds to that energy, and sometimes they don't, but in every case, the empath moves forward stronger and with dignity. In the end, love flourishes only where freedom has room to exist. Respect their distance, respect yourself. That is the only way you will ever truly stand a chance.